Okay, Senator Lee, I appreciate you doing this town hall meeting, and I just have a question, really. I know the majority of people I work with and the majority of the American public is kind of fed up with the partisan politics, and I would just like to hear from you what you intend to do personally to kind of help break this gridlock and reach across the aisle and, you know, come up with some sort of solution to the problems we're running into.
Joe, I really am glad you asked this question because I appreciate the opportunity to address it. This is an issue that is near and dear. It's important to me. First of all, I want to assure you that although the mainstream media likes to report otherwise, there actually is a lot of bipartisanship here in Washington. I can tell you from my perspective within the Senate, we actually get along great as Democrats and Republicans. I in particular get along great with my Democratic friends. I'm one of those who chose to sit next to some of my Democratic friends during the State of the Union. I sat next to my cousin Tom Udall, who represents the state of New Mexico in the Senate, and my other cousin Mark Udall, who represents Colorado in the United States Senate. Both of them are Democrats, and I'm a Republican. One of my best friends in the Senate is a guy named Joe Manchin. He represents West Virginia. Harry Reid is the father of one of my childhood friends, and I have a lot of other Democratic friends, including people like Chuck Schumer. He and I don't agree on a lot of things, and yet I consider him an ally. Al Franken, who used to be on Saturday Night Live, represents the state of Minnesota in the Senate as a Democrat. He and I are good friends, along with Amy Klobuchar, the other Democratic senator from Minnesota. The point is, I work with these people on lots of pieces of legislation. We pass legislation all the time that's bipartisan. In fact, we pass legislation all the time that is bipartisan, and in many, many cases is almost unanimous. Those things don't make headlines. You normally don't hear about those things because, you know, how they say on the news, if it bleeds, it leads. If it involves a lot of contention, it'll get headline coverage. And if it doesn't involve a lot of contention, it doesn't get a lot of coverage. So it is not as if this is a hate-filled place where nothing ever gets done because we just can't stand each other, we can't work together. That just isn't true. There are a few areas where deeply rooted ideological differences that we have as senators, the differences that themselves reflect differences in the constituencies we represent across the United States, do necessarily prevent us from reaching agreement. You can't ask someone who believes that we already have too much government all of a sudden to agree with someone who believes we have not enough government. You can't all of a sudden expect somebody who believes that we ought to be spending and taxing less money to agree with somebody who thinks we ought to be taxing and spending more money. And so in those areas, we just have to negotiate as best we can. Sometimes we reach an agreement, sometimes we don't. But I'll echo something that my friend Tom Coburn, the senator from Oklahoma, said on Meet the Press on Sunday. He said that in many instances in which there is a lot of bipartisan agreement, sometimes that ends up working against the people. Sometimes that ends up with Washington spending too much of your money, sometimes before you've even spent it. Sometimes it results in a $16.5 trillion debt, borrowing money from China, in some instances in order to return some of that same money that we've just borrowed from China to China in the form of foreign aid, which just boggles the mind. So not everything that happens in Washington is something that involves bipartisan rancor, but not everything that involves bipartisan agreement necessarily is good.